My wife's dad, the boss, fired me after I interviewed with other companies, even though he had denied me a raise for 5 consecutive years. I consider this disloyal, he said, revoking my building access on the spot. I smiled, wished him well, and left without causing a scene. 2 days later, he received an email from, you know that feeling when you walk into a room and something's just off? Yeah, that's exactly what hit me the second I stepped into Raymond Ellis's corner office that Tuesday morning. The guy's got this massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, and enough leather-bound books to make you think he actually reads something other than golf magazines. But today, something was different. The usual fake smile was nowhere to be found. My name's Logan Rivers, and I'd been busting my ass at Graypoint Strategies for 5 solid years. Senior analyst, they called me, though honestly, I was doing way more than analyzing anything. I was the guy who stayed until 9 p.m. fixing other people's screw-ups, the one who smooth-talked angry clients back from the edge, and yeah, the one who brought in more revenue than half the so-called VPs combined. And Raymond Ellis? He's my father-in-law, Claire's dad, and the CEO who'd been dangling that promotion carrot in front of me like I was some kind of corporate donkey. Sit down, Logan, he said, and man, his voice had this edge to it that made my stomach drop. No, good morning. No, how's Claire? None of that usual small talk bullcrap. Just straight to business, and not the good kind. I settled into that uncomfortable chair across from his desk. You know the type, designed to make you feel small while the big shot looms over you from his throne. Raymond was shuffling through some papers, taking his sweet time, probably trying to build up the drama. Classic power move. I'd seen him pull this routine with suppliers and junior staff, but never with me. We were family, right? Or at least I thought we were. I got an interesting phone call yesterday, he finally said, still not looking up from whatever he was pretending to read. From Marcus Webb over at Hartfield and Associates. My blood went cold. Marcus was the hiring manager I'd met with the week before. The interview I thought I'd kept under wraps. The one I'd scheduled during my lunch break because, hell, a guy's gotta have options when his father-in-law keeps shooting down his raise requests year after year. Is that so? I managed to keep my voice steady, but inside I was already connecting the dots. This town's business community is smaller than people think, and gossip travels faster than wildfire. Raymond finally looked up, and those cold gray eyes of his, the same ones Claire inherited, though hers actually had warmth in them, were staring right through me. He mentioned you'd interviewed for their senior director position. Funny thing is, you never mentioned anything to me about being unhappy here. Here we go. I could feel the lecture coming. The whole family loyalty speech he'd probably been rehearsing since he hung up with Marcus. But I wasn't some fresh college grad anymore. I was 32 years old, had a mortgage, and was tired of watching less qualified guys get promoted while I got patted on the head and told to wait my turn. I wasn't aware I needed permission to explore my options, I said, keeping it professional even though part of me wanted to remind him about the 5, count 'em, 5, times he'd denied my raise requests. The last one just 3 weeks ago, with the same tired excuse about tightening our belts, while he was showing off photos of his new boat to anyone who'd listen. Options. Raymond leaned back in his chair, and I could practically see the wheels turning. After everything this company has done for you? After I personally vouched for you when you were just some guy dating my daughter? That stung, and he knew it would. Yeah, I'd started at Graypoint as Claire's boyfriend, but I'd earned my place here. Every late night, every saved client relationship, every innovative strategy that had kept us competitive, that was all me. Not daddy's connections, not family favors. Me. I've given this company 5 years of my life, I said, and I could hear my voice getting tighter. I've exceeded every performance metric, brought in millions in new business, and mentored half the junior staff. And what do I have to show for it? You have a steady job, good benefits, and the same salary I started with, adjusted for inflation, which means I'm actually making less now than when I began. The words came out harder than I intended, but screw it. If we were having this conversation, we might as well have it for real. Raymond's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by family. In his world, loyalty meant shutting up and accepting whatever scraps he threw your way. I consider this disloyal, he said, and those 5 words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because they hurt, but because they were so perfectly Raymond. Everything was about loyalty with him, Never about fairness or respect or actually taking care of the people who made his company run. Disloyal. I repeated, tasting the word. Is it disloyal to want to be compensated fairly for my work? Is it disloyal to seek opportunities for growth when those opportunities don't exist here? But Raymond was already reaching for his phone. Security? Yeah, I need someone up here to escort Logan Rivers out of the building. He hung up and opened his desk drawer, pulling out a manila envelope. Your final paycheck is being processed. You can pick up your personal items under supervision. Just like that. 5 years gone. No discussion, no negotiation, no chance to explain or defend myself. He slid my building access card across that massive desk like he was dealing a hand of poker. Your building access ends now, he said, not even bothering to look at me. You know what the crazy part was? I felt relieved. Like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had just been lifted off my shoulders. All those nights I'd gone home frustrated. All those times I'd bitten my tongue when less qualified people got promoted over me. All those fake smiles I'd plastered on during company meetings where Raymond praised everyone except the guy actually doing the work. I stood up, straightened my tie, and did something that probably surprised both of us. I smiled. Not a fake corporate smile, but a real one. The kind of smile you get when you realize you don't have to pretend anymore. Well, Raymond, I said, using his first name for the first time in years, I want to thank you for everything. I learned a lot here, and I wish you and Graypoint all the best. His eyebrows shot up. He'd probably expected me to argue, to beg, to grovel for my job back. But why would I? The man had just shown me exactly what he thought of 5 years of dedication and hard work. Security showed up, 2 guys I actually knew pretty well from all those late nights at the office. They looked embarrassed as hell, which made me feel a little better about the whole situation. Take your time cleaning out your desk, one of them said quietly as we walked to the elevator. No rush. The ride down felt like the longest and shortest elevator trip of my life. 47 floors, and with each one, I felt a little more free. By the time we reached my floor, I was actually looking forward to packing up my stuff. My desk was right where I'd left it that morning, covered with the usual chaos of reports, client files, and those little personal touches that make a workspace feel like home. The framed photo of Claire and me from our honeymoon in Italy. The little cactus she'd bought me as a joke about surviving in a hostile environment. My coffee mug with World's Okayest Analyst printed on it. A gag gift from the team that had somehow become my favorite. As I packed everything into the cardboard box security had provided, I couldn't help but think about all the moments that had led to this. The late nights fixing other people's mistakes. The times I'd saved client relationships that everyone else had written off. The strategies I'd developed that had become company standard practice. All of it fitting into one small box. Claire didn't even know yet. She was probably at her marketing job across town, completely unaware that her husband had just been fired by her father. That conversation was going to be fun. You ever notice how your whole life can fit into a cardboard box when push comes to shove? I'm standing here in the Graypoint parking garage, staring at this beat-up banker's box that's holding everything I accumulated over 5 years of what I thought was building a career. The security guards had been decent about it, gave me all the time I needed, didn't hover over my shoulder like I was going to steal office supplies or download client data onto a flash drive. Hell, Tommy even helped me carry the thing down to my car. The weight of the box wasn't the problem. I mean, we're talking about some picture frames, a couple of notebooks, my desk plant that somehow survived the fluorescent light wasteland of cubicle life, and a few other random pieces of office junk that seemed important at the time. Maybe 15 pounds, tops. But man, it felt like I was carrying a boulder. Not because of the physical weight, because of everything it represented. 5 years, 60 months. God knows how many late nights, weekend emails, and quick calls that turned into hour-long problem-solving sessions. I'd given Graypoint everything I had, and apparently all of it fit into a space smaller than a microwave box. That's a hell of a reality check right there. I popped my trunk and set the box inside, right next to my emergency roadside kit and the jumper cables I'd never actually used. The thing looked so small and pathetic sitting there, like a sad monument to wasted potential. I slammed the trunk shut maybe a little harder than necessary, the sound echoing through the concrete cavern of the parking garage. Before I got in the car, I took one last look up at the Graypoint building. 47 floors of steel and glass, reaching up into the cloudy Seattle sky like some kind of corporate monument. I used to feel proud walking into that lobby every morning, used to think I was part of something bigger than myself. Now it just looked like what it was. A big expensive box where rich guys got richer while the rest of us did the actual work. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 5 years helping build Raymond's empire, and now I was driving away with my career in a cardboard box that probably cost him about 50 cents. The math on that seemed pretty screwed up. My phone started buzzing before I even got out of the parking garage. Claire's ringtone. That Bruno Mars song she'd programmed in because she said it reminded her of our first dance. Under normal circumstances, hearing it would make me smile. Today, it made my stomach clench up like a fist. I hit the Bluetooth button on my steering wheel. Hey, babe. Logan. Her voice sounded shaky, confused. Ray just called me. He said you resigned. What happened? Are you okay? Of course Raymond had called her first. Probably wanted to get his version of events on the record before I had a chance to tell my side. Classic move from a guy who'd built his career on controlling the narrative. He fired me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I merged onto I-5. Traffic was lighter than usual for a Tuesday afternoon, which was good because my hands were gripping the steering wheel hard enough to leave marks. Silence on the other end. Then I heard her take a shaky breath. What? But why? What did you do? I took an interview, I said simply. Last week, with Hartfield and Associates. Somehow word got back to your dad, and he decided that was grounds for immediate termination. But I could hear her struggling with this, trying to make sense of it. Claire had always been caught in the middle between me and her father, and I knew this was tearing her apart. You didn't even get the raise? No. Again, those 2 words carried the weight of 5 years of disappointment. 5 years of being told I was valuable while being treated like I was replaceable. Another long pause. I could picture her sitting at her desk at the marketing firm, probably staring out her window at Elliott Bay, trying to process what this meant for us. For our plans. For the future we'd been building together. I can't believe he did this, she finally whispered. I mean, I can believe it, but... Logan, I'm so sorry. That's when it hit me, the real weight of what had happened. It wasn't just about losing my job or getting fired by my father-in-law. It was about the complete destruction of the professional identity I'd spent 5 years building. I'd been Logan Rivers, senior analyst at Graypoint Strategies. I'd had business cards with that title, a LinkedIn profile that talked about my achievements, a whole persona built around being this rising star in the consulting world. Now I was just Logan Rivers, unemployed guy with a cardboard box in his trunk. The drive home felt longer than usual, even though I was probably making better time than my normal commute. Every red light gave me more time to think, and thinking was the last thing I wanted to do right now. My brain kept cycling through all the what-ifs and should-haves. What if I'd handled the Ray's conversation differently? What if I'd been more discreet about the interview? Should I have seen this coming? But then I'd remember Raymond's face when he said the word disloyal, the cold dismissal in his voice, the way he'd slid my ID card across that desk like I was nothing more than a security risk. And I'd realized that none of those what-ifs mattered, because this was never really about the interview. This was about Raymond Ellis needing to remind everyone, including his own family, who was in charge. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let this break me. Yeah, getting fired sucked. Yeah, having it happen because I'd dared to explore other options was insulting as hell. But maybe, just maybe, this was exactly the kick in the ass I needed. I sat in the car for a few minutes after I turned off the engine, looking at our little house with its blue shutters and the garden Claire had been working on all summer. We'd bought this place 2 years ago, thinking it was the start of our permanent life together. A place to build a family, to put down roots, to create something lasting. The cardboard box was still in my trunk, but somehow it felt different now. Less like a monument to failure and more like, well, like the first step towards something new. 5 years of my life might fit in that box, but that didn't mean the next 5 years had to be small enough to fit in one too. Time to figure out what came next. Once I got inside the house, I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I went straight to my home office and opened the file cabinet drawer I'd labeled career stuff. Buried underneath tax documents and insurance papers was a manila folder that had been sitting there like a ticking time bomb. The tab read, "Raises denied," in my own handwriting. and just looking at it made my jaw clench. You know how some people keep photo albums or scrapbooks to remember the good times? Well, this was my scrapbook of professional disappointment, and I'd been adding to it religiously for 5 damn years. I pulled out the folder and spread everything across my desk like I was building a case for court. Which, in a way, I guess I was. A case against my own naivety for believing that hard work and loyalty actually meant something at Graypoint Strategies. The first document was from year 1, back when I still thought Raymond might actually be looking out for me. A performance review dated March 15, 2020, with all those corporate buzzwords that make you feel good until you realize they don't come with a paycheck increase. Logan consistently exceeds expectations, it read. His analytical skills and client management abilities are exceptional for someone at his level. Exceptional for someone at his level. Even back then, the condescension was there, hiding behind the praise like a snake in the grass. Attached to that review was my formal request for a salary adjustment, a modest 15% increase that would have brought me up to market rate for someone with my qualifications and track record. Raymond's response, delivered via email 2 weeks later, was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. While we greatly appreciate your contributions, current market conditions require us to be conservative with compensation adjustments. We'll revisit this during the next review cycle. Year 2, same song, different verse. Another glowing performance review, another exceeds expectations, rating, another request for fair compensation. This time Raymond had the balls to cite budget constraints, while the company newsletter that same month featured a 2-page spread about Graypoint's record-breaking quarterly profits. The math didn't add up, but apparently my opinion on basic arithmetic wasn't welcome in the C-suite. I flipped through year 3's documents, feeling that familiar burn in my chest. This was when I'd started documenting everything obsessively, printing out emails and saving performance metrics like I was building evidence for some future reckoning. Maybe subconsciously, I knew this day was coming. The performance review from that year was even more effusive in its praise. Logan has become an indispensable asset to our organization, Raymond had written. His leadership of the Morrison Industries account recovery saved the company an estimated $3.2 million in potential losses. Indispensable. That word should have come with a raise, a promotion, or at least a cost of living adjustment. Instead, it came with another rejection letter citing economic uncertainty and the need to maintain operational stability. Economic uncertainty. This from a guy who'd bought a 40-foot yacht that same summer and named it Graypoint Glory. I'd seen the pictures on his Facebook page, Raymond and his golf buddies sipping champagne on the deck, while I was working 60-hour weeks to maintain his operational stability. Year 4 was where the rejections started getting creative. While your performance continues to exceed expectations, we're implementing a company-wide salary freeze to ensure our competitive position in the market. A salary freeze that apparently didn't apply to executive bonuses or the VP position they'd created for Raymond's old fraternity brother who'd never worked a day in consulting before joining the company. I remember that rejection stinging more than the others because by then I'd started seeing the writing on the wall. I wasn't being held back because of budget constraints or market conditions. I was being held back because Raymond Ellis had figured out he could get premium work for bargain basement prices, and why mess with a good thing? The most recent rejection, just 3 weeks ago, was sitting right on top of the pile like a fresh wound. This time I'd come armed with market research, salary comparisons, and a detailed analysis of my contributions to the company's bottom line. I'd even calculated that the clients I'd personally brought in were generating over $12 million in annual revenue. Raymond's response had been his most dismissive yet. Logan, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we need to focus on team cohesion rather than patience. 5 years of patience, and the only thing that had risen was Raymond's bank account and his sense of entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text from Jared Martinez, one of the few people at Graypoint who'd always shot straight with me. Jared worked in legal and had a front row seat to all the company's behind-the-scenes drama. Man, this is messed up. You carried that company. I typed back. Apparently not enough. But even as I sent that response, another text was coming in from a number I didn't immediately recognize. When I opened it, my heart damn near stopped. Hi Logan, this is Kira Benson from VistaCore Innovations. I hope you remember me from our conversation last week. I know this might be unexpected timing, but would you be available to meet this Friday? The board reviewed your proposal, and they're very impressed. I think you'll want to hear what we have to discuss. VistaCore Innovations, the company I'd interviewed with the week before. Not Hartfield and Associates like Raymond had mentioned, which meant either he'd gotten his facts wrong, or there were multiple companies interested in poaching Gray Point's indispensable senior analyst. I stared at that text for a long time, reading it over and over like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. After 5 years of being told to wait, to be patient, to accept whatever scraps Raymond felt like throwing my way, someone else was actively pursuing me. The irony was almost laughable. Raymond had fired me for being disloyal because I dared to explore other options. But maybe the real disloyalty had been his 5 years of stringing me along with empty promises while he counted the money I was making for him. I looked back at the folder spread across my desk, 5 years of documented disappointment and broken promises. Then I looked at Kira's text again. Yes, I typed back. Friday works perfectly. What time? The response came back almost immediately, 2 p.m. I think you're going to like what we have to offer. For the first time since walking out of Raymond's office, I smiled. A real smile, not the fake corporate version I'd been wearing like a mask for the past 5 years. Maybe getting fired was the best thing that could have happened to me. Friday morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror trying to decide between the navy blue tie or the burgundy one. Funny how getting fired can make you second-guess everything, even stuff as simple as picking out a tie. 3 days ago, I would have grabbed whichever one was closest and called it good. Today, everything felt like it mattered more. I went with the burgundy. Claire always said it brought out my eyes. And hell, I figured I could use all the confidence I could get. The drive downtown to VistaCore's offices gave me plenty of time to think, maybe too much time. My brain kept cycling between excitement and terror, like I was on some kind of emotional roller coaster that wouldn't stop long enough to let me off. 1 minute, I was imagining myself in a corner office with actual decision-making authority. The next, I was wondering if this whole thing was just a courtesy meeting before they told me thanks, but no thanks. VistaCore's building was everything Gray Point's wasn't. Where Raymond's place was all dark wood and intimidating marble, designed to make you feel small. This place was bright, modern, and somehow welcoming. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in actual sunlight. The lobby had comfortable seating that looked like people might actually use it, and the receptionist smiled like she meant it instead of like it was part of her job description. Mr. Rivers? Ms. Benson is expecting you, she said, gesturing toward a bank of elevators that looked like they belonged in a spaceship rather than an office building. 23rd floor, suite 2340. The elevator ride up was smooth and quiet, nothing like the ancient, groaning death trap at Gray Point that sounded like it might give up the ghost between floors. Through the glass walls, I could see people actually collaborating, having animated discussions around whiteboards covered in colorful diagrams and charts. It looked like the kind of place where ideas mattered more than hierarchy. Kira Benson met me at the elevator herself, which threw me for a loop. At Gray Point, executives like her would have sent an assistant to collect me and deliver me to the appropriate conference room like a package. But here she was, extending her hand with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Logan, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her handshake firm but not trying to prove anything. "I hope the drive wasn't too bad." Kira was probably in her early 40s, with short auburn hair and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you're good at what you do without needing to prove it to everyone in the room. She was wearing a sharp gray suit that looked expensive but not flashy, and when she walked, people nodded respectfully without looking intimidated. "Traffic wasn't too crazy," I said, following her down a hallway lined with modern art and actual plants, not the plastic nonsense that decorated Gray Point's sterile corridors. Good, good. Listen, I know this week has been eventful for you," she said, and I appreciated that she didn't dance around the elephant in the room. "I hope you know that what happened at Gray Point has nothing to do with how we see your value." That stopped me in my tracks. Word traveled fast in Seattle's business community, but I hadn't expected it to travel that fast. "News gets around," she said, reading my expression. "Small world, smaller industry." But honestly, Logan, what I heard only reinforced what I already knew about you from our interview. She led me into a conference room that had one wall entirely made of glass. offering a stunning view of Elliott Bay and the Olympics beyond. The table was a sleek piece of polished wood that probably cost more than my car, but somehow it didn't feel ostentatious. It felt functional, like a tool designed to get work done rather than impress visitors. "Can I get you anything? Coffee, water, something stronger?" Kira asked with a wink. "I know it's been a rough week." "Coffee would be great," I said, settling into a chair that was actually comfortable instead of the medieval torture devices Raymond preferred for his meetings. While Kira poured coffee from a machine that looked like it belonged in a high-end cafe, I tried to calm my nerves and focus on why I was here. This wasn't about what had happened at Gray Point. This was about what could happen next. "So," Kira said, sliding a steaming mug across the table, "let's talk about your future." She opened a leather portfolio and pulled out a document that made my heart skip a beat. Official letterhead, multiple pages, the kind of formal presentation that meant serious business. "Logan, I'll cut to the chase because I think you've had enough corporate BS to last a lifetime," she said, leaning forward slightly. "We reviewed your proposal from last week, the strategy framework you outlined for expanding into the Pacific Northwest market. It was brilliant, thorough, innovative, and exactly the kind of thinking we need here." I felt my chest tighten with something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine professional validation from someone who wasn't related to my wife. "The board met Wednesday night," Kira continued, "and they asked me to make you an offer. Not for a senior analyst position, not for some middle management role where you'll spend the next 5 years waiting for someone to retire. We want to offer you the position of Director of Global Accounts." Director? I'd been dreaming about a title like that for 5 years, and Raymond had made it clear it was never going to happen at Gray Point. "Not for me, anyway. You'd be leading your own team," Kira said, sliding the offer letter across the table. 7 direct reports to start, with room to grow as we expand. You'd have full authority over account strategy, client relationships, and budget allocation for your division. My hands were actually shaking as I picked up the document. The first page was all the standard legal language, but the second page, holy shit. The salary number jumped off the page like it was printed in neon. Nearly double what I'd been making at Gray Point. Not just double what I'd been asking for in those rejected raise requests. Double what I'd actually been earning. "I know it's a big number," Kira said, watching my reaction. "But you're not being overpaid, Logan. You were being underappreciated." I had to read the figure 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Base salary, performance bonuses, stock options, health benefits that actually covered things, for weeks of vacation that I was apparently expected to take rather than let accumulate indefinitely. "This is," I started, then stopped. I'd been about to say generous, but that wasn't the right word. Generous implied charity, and this wasn't charity. This was recognition. This was what I was actually worth in the marketplace. "I'm honored," I finally managed, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Truly honored that you'd consider me for this role." Kira smiled, and there was something almost maternal in her expression. "Logan, I've been in this business for 15 years. And I've seen a lot of talented people get ground down by companies that didn't value them properly. When I see someone with your skills and drive, someone who's been held back for no good reason, it's not just good business to make them an offer. It's the right thing to do." She leaned back in her chair, giving me space to process what I was looking at. "Take the weekend to think about it," she said. "Talk it over with Claire. But I hope you'll say yes, because I think we could build something amazing together." I looked out at the view of Elliott Bay, then back at the offer letter, then at Kira's expectant face. For the first time in 5 years, someone was betting on me instead of betting against me. "I don't need the weekend," I said. "Yes, absolutely yes." I floated through the rest of Friday like I was walking on air. Signed the offer letter right there in Kira's office, shook hands on a start date 2 weeks out, and drove home with the kind of stupid grin on my face that probably made other drivers think I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was. But it was the good kind. The kind where your whole world shifts and suddenly everything that seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Claire's car was already in the driveway when I got home, which meant she'd left work early. That could be good or bad, depending on how her dad had spun the whole situation. I found her in the kitchen, stress cooking, which for Claire meant making enough food to feed a small army. The counter was covered with ingredients for what looked like lasagna, garlic bread, and some kind of elaborate salad that required more chopping than a Benihana show. "Hey," I I said, loosening my tie as I walked up behind her. Smells amazing in here. She didn't turn around immediately, just kept dicing tomatoes with the kind of precision that meant she was working through some serious emotions. How did it go? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Better than I could have imagined, I said, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. Claire, they offered me a director position, director of global accounts, with my own team and everything. That got her attention. She set down the knife and turned to face me, and I could see the relief and pride fighting with something else in her expression. Worry maybe, or guilt. Logan, that's incredible, she said, and she meant it. But then her face fell a little. Why didn't you tell me you were applying elsewhere? There it was. The conversation I'd been dreading but knew we had to have. I leaned against the counter, trying to figure out how to explain 5 years of frustration without making her feel like she had to choose between me and her family. Because every time I brought up leaving Gray Point, you said your father would come around, I said gently. You always asked me to give him more time, to be patient, to trust that he'd do the right thing eventually. Claire's shoulders sagged a little. I really believed that, she said quietly. I thought because you were family, he'd take care of you. I know you did, babe. And I wanted to believe it too. I reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. But after 5 years of the same excuses, I had to start looking out for myself. For us. She nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. Claire had always been caught between two worlds, the corporate dynasty her father had built and the life she was trying to build with me. Most of the time, she navigated that balance gracefully, but situations like this made it impossible to keep everyone happy. He told the family you betrayed him, she said, and there was an edge of anger in her voice that I didn't think was directed at me. At dinner Wednesday night, he made this whole speech about loyalty and family values. Said you'd stabbed him in the back after everything he'd done for you. I felt my jaw clench. Of course, Raymond had gotten to the family first, spinning the narrative to make himself look like the victim. Classic narcissist move. Hurt someone, then play the wounded party when they have the audacity to respond. What did you say? I asked. Nothing, Claire admitted. I should have stood up for you, but I was so shocked and confused. I didn't know what had really happened, and everyone was looking at me like I should have some kind of explanation. You don't owe them an explanation for my decisions, I said firmly. This isn't about you, Claire. This is between me and your dad. But even as I said it, we both knew that wasn't entirely true. In a family like the Elises, everything was political, and wives were expected to keep their husbands in line. The fact that I'd gone rogue reflected poorly on Claire's ability to manage the situation, at least in Raymond's twisted worldview. He said you left with client files, Claire said suddenly, like she'd just remembered something important. Said security was doing an investigation. I actually laughed at that one. Yeah, I left with my coffee mug and a succulent plant. Real dangerous stuff. Your dad's grasping at straws, trying to justify firing me for exploring my options. My phone buzzed with a text, and when I glanced at it, I saw it was from Ryan, Claire's younger brother and Raymond's golden child. Ryan had always been decent to me, probably because he was secure enough in his position as heir apparent that he didn't see me as a threat. He's panicking, the text read. Said you left with client files. Security's checking. This is insane, man. I showed the text to Claire, and she rolled her eyes. Of course he's panicking. You probably handled half his major accounts personally. More than half, I said, then immediately regretted it. The last thing I wanted was to sound like I was bragging or trying to hurt Raymond's business. But it was the truth. I'd been carrying more than my share of the load for years. I texted Ryan back, let him panic. I left with my coffee mug and a succulent plant. Nothing else. The response came immediately. LOL. Dad's lost his mind. Everyone knows you're the most honest guy at the company. Sorry this happened. That actually made me feel a little better. If Raymond's own son thought the whole thing was ridiculous, maybe the rest of the family would see through the bullshit too. You know what the crazy part is? Claire said, leaning against the stove. I've been defending him for years, making excuses for why he wouldn't promote you or give you raises. But watching him do this, it's like I'm seeing him clearly for the first time. He's your dad, I said. You're supposed to see the best in him. But I'm your wife, she shot back. I'm supposed to have your back too. And I haven't been doing that. I walked over and pulled her into a hug, feeling some of the tension leave her body as she melted against me. "You've been in an impossible position," I said. "I never wanted you to have to choose sides." "Well, I'm choosing now," she said, her voice muffled against my chest. "Team Logan all the way." We stood there for a while, holding each other in our kitchen that smelled like garlic and oregano. And for the first time in days, I felt like we were going to be okay. More than okay, actually. We were going to be better than we'd been in years, because now we didn't have to pretend that working for Raymond was sustainable or healthy. "So tell me about this new job," Claire said, pulling back to look at me. "Director sounds pretty impressive." "It is impressive," I said, grinning. "And the salary." I told her the number, and her eyes went wide. "Holy shit, Logan. That's incredible, right?" Turns out I was worth more than Raymond was willing to pay. A lot more. Claire shook her head, and I could see the anger building behind her eyes. 5 years. 5 years he strung you along while you were worth this much the whole time. "Hey," I said, taking her face in my hands. "Don't be angry. Be happy. This is the best thing that could have happened to us." She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her since this whole mess started. "You're right. This is amazing. I'm proud of you." Later that evening, as we sat down to eat the feast she'd prepared, my phone rang. Raymond's name appeared on the screen, and Claire and I looked at each other across the table. "Don't answer it," she said. "Whatever he wants, it can wait." I hit decline and set the phone aside. For the first time in 5 years, Raymond Ellis would have to wait for my attention instead of the other way around. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. Thursday morning started like any other day in my new unemployed life. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my pajamas, laptop open, coffee getting cold while I updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect my shiny new title at Vistacor. It felt surreal typing Director of Global Accounts after 5 years of being stuck in analyst purgatory, but there it was in black and white. Proof that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Claire had already left for work, kissing me goodbye with a smile that told me she was finally starting to believe this whole mess might actually work out in our favor. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing by outside. Peaceful even. The kind of morning that makes you think maybe unemployment isn't the worst thing in the world when you've got a guaranteed job waiting for you in 10 days. I was debating whether to make another pot of coffee when my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb at Hartfield & Associates. The guy who'd unknowingly started this whole chain of events by mentioning my interview to someone who mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to Raymond. "Just heard what happened at Gray Point. That's messed up, man. Hope you landed on your feet." Before I could respond, another text came in from Sarah Chan, a former Gray Point colleague who'd jumped ship about 6 months ago for a better opportunity. "Holy shit, Logan. Word is Raymond's having an absolute meltdown. What did you do?" That got my attention. I typed back. "Nothing. Just got fired for taking an interview." "What? Check your email. Something big is going down." I opened my personal Gmail, scanning through the usual spam and newsletters, but nothing jumped out. The original email was sent from Vistacor's corporate communications team to Raymond Ellis personally, with CCs to the entire Gray Point executive team. My heart started pounding before I even read the first line, because I had a pretty good idea what this was about. "Dear Mr. Ellis," it began, and I could practically feel the polite professionalism dripping off every word. "We hope this message finds you well. After careful consideration and thorough review of our current vendor relationships, Vistacor Innovations has decided to terminate our consulting contract with Gray Point Strategies, effective immediately." Holy shit. I read that line 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Vistacor, the company that had just offered me a director position, was pulling their business from Gray Point. The same Vistacor that represented one of Raymond's biggest accounts. The same Vistacor that generated somewhere in the neighborhood of $18 million in annual revenue for Gray Point. This decision was not made lightly. The email continued, and we want to emphasize that it reflects no dissatisfaction with the quality of work performed by Gray Point's team members, many of whom have provided exceptional service over the years. Even in their breakup email, they were classier than Raymond had been when he fired me. No accusations, no drama. Just professional courtesy and respect for the people who'd actually done the work. However, recent organizational changes at Gray Point have caused us to reassess our partnership priorities and strategic alignment. We believe this change will better serve Vistacor's long-term objectives and values. Recent organizational changes. That was corporate speak for, "We heard you fired Logan Rivers like an asshole, and we don't do business with companies that treat good people like garbage." The email went on to outline the transition timeline, the return of confidential materials, and all the other legal necessities that come with ending a major business relationship. But the key message was clear. Vistacor was done with GrayPoint, and they weren't sugarcoating why. My phone rang immediately. Sarah's name on the caller ID. "Did you read it?" she asked before I could even say hello. "Just finished," I said, still staring at the screen like the words might rearrange themselves. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. $18 million. Try 22 million, she corrected. That's what they were projecting for next year with the expansion project. "Logan, this is nuclear." Raymond is absolutely losing his mind. I felt a weird mix of emotions washing over me. Part of me was thrilled that Raymond was finally facing consequences for his actions. Part of me felt guilty that other people at GrayPoint, good people who had nothing to do with this mess, were going to suffer because of what he'd done. And part of me was just stunned that Vistacor had taken such a dramatic step. "I need to be clear about something," I said to Sarah. "I had nothing to do with this decision. I didn't ask them to pull their business, didn't even hint that they should. This was entirely their call." "Logan, relax. Nobody thinks you orchestrated this. But everybody knows you were the primary contact on that account for the past 3 years. Vistacor probably feels like Raymond threw away their most trusted partner for no good reason." She was right, and that made me feel a little better about the whole situation. I hadn't set out to hurt GrayPoint's business. I just wanted to be treated fairly. But apparently Vistacor had drawn their own conclusions about what my termination said about the company's values and judgment. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Kira Benson herself. "Morning, Logan. I assume you've heard about our communication to GrayPoint by now. Want to be crystal clear that this decision was made independently by our board, with no input from you whatsoever. Looking forward to working with someone who values loyalty and integrity." I screenshot that text immediately and sent it to Claire. If Raymond tried to blame me for Vistacor's decision, I wanted documentation that I'd had nothing to do with it. Another text came in, this one from Tommy Rodriguez in GrayPoint Security. "Dude, Mr. Ellis just called an emergency meeting. He's asking if you took any Vistacor files when you left. I told him no way. I was there when you packed up. Just wanted you to know." I laughed out loud at that one. Of course, Raymond's first instinct was to blame me for somehow sabotaging the relationship. The idea that Vistacor might have made their own independent judgment about his character and leadership abilities probably never even occurred to him. "Thanks, Tommy," I texted back. "Appreciate you having my back." The rest of the morning brought a steady stream of messages from former colleagues, each one painting a picture of chaos and panic at GrayPoint. Raymond had apparently locked himself in his office with the senior partners, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Emergency calls to Vistacor had gone unanswered. Attempts to reach me through mutual contacts had been ignored. By lunchtime, the story had made its way through Seattle's tight-knit business community. My phone was buzzing constantly with calls from headhunters, former clients, and colleagues from other firms who'd heard that I was suddenly available and that my former employer was imploding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Raymond had fired me for being disloyal, and now his company was facing the consequences of that disloyalty in the most public and expensive way possible. I closed my laptop and poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, savoring the bitter taste and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the universe does keep score. I hadn't asked for this to happen, hadn't planned it or orchestrated it, but I also wasn't going to feel guilty about it. Raymond Ellis had made his choice. Now he was living with the consequences. And honestly, he'd earned every bit of what was coming to him. Friday morning hit GrayPoint like a freight train carrying bad news and broken dreams. My phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree with messages from people still trapped inside Raymond's corporate circus, and let me tell you, the show was getting ugly fast. Tessa Martinez, one of the few decent people left in that place, sent me a screenshot that made my coffee taste even better. "Emergency all-hands meeting." Raymond's shouting, asking who talked to Vistacor. The timestamp showed 8:47 a.m., which meant Raymond had probably been awake all night, trying to figure out how to spend $18 million walking out the door. The image showed a packed conference room, with everyone looking like they'd rather be getting root canals. Raymond was standing at the head of the table, his usually perfect silver hair looking like he'd been running his hands through it all night. Even through a blurry phone photo, you could see the desperation in his body language. "This is insane," Tessa texted. "He's acting like someone committed treason." 20 minutes later, Jared called me directly. "Dude, you need to hear this. 3 board members just cornered Raymond about your firing." Apparently Margaret Walsh, the Iron Lady herself, asked him point-blank why he terminated the cleanest record in the company over a job interview. Margaret Walsh asking questions was like the corporate equivalent of your mom using your full name. Bad things were about to happen. "What did he say?" I asked, genuinely curious how Raymond would try to justify his tantrum to people who actually understood business. Something about loyalty and company culture. Margaret just stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Then she asked if he thought Vistacor pulled their contract because they felt disrespected by how we treated their primary contact. The silence on Raymond's end must have been deafening. "Here's the best part," Jared continued, barely containing his laughter. "Tom Bradley, the guy who's been kissing Raymond's ass for 10 years, actually asked if there was a way to get you back before this got worse." That stopped me cold. Tom Bradley was Raymond's golf buddy, the guy who'd gotten that VP position despite having 0 consulting experience. If even Tom was questioning the decision, Raymond was in deeper shit than I'd realized. And I prompted. Raymond said it was too late, that bridges had been burned. Margaret looked around the room and said, "The only bridge I see burned is the one you torched when you fired our best performer for having ambition." Damn, Margaret Walsh didn't mess around when it came to protecting the bottom line, and losing a $20 million client because of ego was exactly the kind of stupidity that made her legendary temper flare up. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from Claire. "Ryan just called. Dad's in full panic mode. Wants to meet with you. Offering a bonus and everything." I laughed out loud at that one. A bonus. After 5 years of denying me raises, Raymond thought he could wave some cash around and make this whole mess disappear. The man really didn't understand that this wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, something you can't buy after you've already thrown it away. "Tell Ryan I appreciate the offer," I texted back, "but I've already started with Vistacor." Which was technically true. My official start date was still a week away, but in my mind, I'd already moved on. The old Logan would have been tempted by the bonus, would have wondered if maybe Raymond had finally learned his lesson. But the new Logan, the one who'd spent a week discovering what it felt like to be valued, wasn't interested in going backward. Besides, something told me this was just the beginning of Raymond's problems. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that made my coffee taste like opportunity. Elaine Monroe, chairwoman of Gray Point's board of directors, and the kind of woman who could make grown executives wet themselves with a single raised eyebrow, wanted to meet. Not Raymond, her. Personally. "I understand you've been through quite an ordeal, Logan," she said in that crisp, no-nonsense voice that had terrified CEOs across the Pacific Northwest for 30 years. "Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I think we need to have a conversation." An hour later, I found myself sitting across from the Iron Lady herself at a quiet cafe downtown, far from Gray Point's offices and prying eyes. Elaine was exactly what you'd expect. Silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun, sharp blue suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Logan, let me be direct," she said after we'd ordered. "Raymond acted without board approval when he terminated you. That was his first mistake. His second was failing to consider how it would look to our clients." I sipped my coffee and waited. Elaine Monroe didn't call emergency meetings to make small talk. "We'd like to offer you reinstatement," she continued. "Significant salary increase, leadership position, full autonomy over your accounts. Whatever Raymond should have offered you years ago, the old me would have jumped at this. 5 years of fighting for recognition, and here it was being handed to me on a silver platter. But the new me, the one who'd tasted what it felt like to be actually wanted, just felt tired." "That's incredibly generous, Ms. Monroe," I said carefully. "But I've already accepted a position with Vistacor. I start next week." Her expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of respect in those sharp eyes. "Smart move. They're lucky to have you." She leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask what would have made you stay?" "Hypothetically." I thought about that for a moment, Really thought about it. If anyone had acted like they wanted me to, I said finally. Not needed me, not tolerated me, wanted me. Like I was an asset worth investing in rather than a problem to manage. Elaine nodded slowly. Fair enough. That's exactly what I told the board this morning. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence. Two professionals who understood exactly what had gone wrong and why. When we stood to leave, she extended her hand. Good luck at VistaCore, Logan. And thank you for being honest about what happened. It's helped us see some things more clearly. I shook her hand, surprised by how final it felt. The first time I'd left Gray Point, I'd been escorted out by security. This time, I was walking away by choice, with my head held high and the respect of someone who mattered. Take care, Ms. Monroe. I hope you find what you're looking for. As I walked back to my car, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or resentful or looking for revenge. I was just done. 5 years of fighting to be valued at a place that would never value me was over. Time to build something new. My first month at VistaCore felt like stepping into a completely different universe, one where people actually gave a damn about what you had to say. No more tiptoeing around fragile egos or translating every idea through 3 layers of corporate politics. Just straight-up collaboration with people who wanted to be there. I had a team of 7 now, and man, what a difference that made. These weren't burned-out corporate zombies going through the motions. These were sharp, motivated professionals who brought ideas to the table instead of waiting for someone else to tell them what to think. Sarah Kim, my lead analyst, had this way of breaking down complex market data that made even the most boring spreadsheets tell a story. Marcus Thompson could charm the pants off the most difficult clients, and Jenny Walsh, no relation to Margaret, thankfully, had a strategic mind that could spot opportunities 3 moves ahead. We weren't just managing accounts, we were building relationships. Real ones. The kind where clients called you first when they had problems because they trusted you to find solutions, not just bill them for hours. The travel was incredible too. In 5 years at Gray Point, I'd maybe left Seattle a dozen times for business. In my first month at VistaCore, I'd been to Portland twice, San Francisco once, and had a week-long strategy session in Denver that actually resulted in actionable plans instead of corporate buzzword bingo. At the monthly leadership dinner, Kira stood up with her glass of wine and looked right at me. To Logan, she said, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. Proof that knowing your worth changes everything. The applause felt different than any recognition I'd ever gotten at Gray Point. This wasn't polite corporate clapping. This was genuine appreciation from people who understood what I brought to the table. I was too stunned to speak, honestly. After 5 years of feeling invisible, having a room full of successful people acknowledge my value was overwhelming in the best possible way. Claire had been skeptical at first, not about my abilities, but about whether any company could really be that different from Gray Point. But when she visited my new office and saw the energy, saw how people interacted with each other and with me, something clicked. You were never disloyal, she said quietly as we stood in my corner office, looking out at the city lights. You were just ready for something better. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed in just a few weeks. From unemployed and uncertain to leading a team and building something meaningful. From being treated like an expendable resource to being valued as a strategic asset. The best part? This was just the beginning. For the first time in years, I could see a future that wasn't limited by someone else's small vision of what I could accomplish. 12 months later, I was sitting in my corner office at VistaCore, watching Seattle's morning fog roll off Elliott Bay, when Tessa sent me a LinkedIn message that made me smile. Thought you should know. People still talk about the day you left. You gave us courage. A year, 365 days since Raymond Ellis called me disloyal and escorted me out of his building like a common criminal. Looking back, it felt like a lifetime ago, but also like yesterday. Funny how perspective works when you're not constantly fighting just to be heard. The Gray Point Gossip Network had kept me updated on the aftermath, even though I'd never asked for it. Raymond had stepped down quietly in October, pursuing other opportunities, according to the press release, which was corporate speak for forced out by the board before he could do any more damage. Margaret Walsh had taken over as interim CEO and was apparently cleaning house with the efficiency of a military operation. They'd lost 2 more major clients after VistaCore pulled out, both citing strategic realignment and evolving partnership priorities. Translation: word got around about how they treated good people, and nobody wanted to be next. I never gloated, never posted anything smug on social media, never even mentioned GrayPoint struggles when former colleagues reached out. That chapter of my life was closed, and I wasn't interested in looking backward when there was so much to build ahead. My team had grown to 12 people now. We'd landed 3 major new accounts, including one that had specifically sought us out after hearing about our innovative approach to client relationships. Kira had hinted that another promotion was coming, possibly a VP track, with equity options that would make the VistaCore dream even sweeter. Claire and I had started talking about buying a bigger house, maybe something with a view and enough space for the family. We were finally ready to start. The financial stress that had been hanging over us for years was gone, replaced by genuine excitement about what came next. Ryan texted me occasionally. Family dinners were apparently much quieter without Raymond's constant presence, and Claire's mom seemed happier too. Even family dynamics improved when you removed the toxic element that had been poisoning everything. But the message that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Marcus Webb from Hartfield and Associates, the guy whose innocent phone call had set this whole chain of events in motion, sent me a note. Just want you to know, your story made me rethink how we treat talent here. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to good people is getting fired by bad bosses. I closed my laptop and looked around my office. Photos of my team celebrating our latest win, thank you notes from satisfied clients, the view of a city full of possibilities. My name was Logan Rivers, and getting fired that Tuesday morning was absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just rising, thriving, and never looking back. Sometimes it's just becoming who you were meant to be all along. I stood there in our dimly lit dining room, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and nerves. It was our 15th anniversary, and I'd spent the whole day planning this dinner to remind Clarissa how much we still had together, how much I still loved her despite everything. The kids, well, just Marley now since she was the only one still at home, were supposed to be part of this too, a family moment. I'd even gone out and bought a small gift, nothing flashy, just something meaningful. My hand shook a little as I set the tiny box on the table in front of Clarissa, wrapped in simple silver paper with a red ribbon I'd tied myself. I'd practiced what I'd say all morning. 15 years, babe. We've made it through a lot. This is for you. But before I could even get the words out, she glanced at it, then at me, and rolled her eyes so hard I could almost hear them creak. You're still jobless, she said, her voice sharp like a knife cutting through the warm air. You couldn't even afford a decent gift, could you? I froze, my mouth half open, the words I'd rehearsed dying in my throat. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this wasn't about money, that I'd poured my heart into this night. But then Marley piped up from across the table, her teenage sneer cutting deeper than her mother's words. We don't need your cheap box, Dad. Take it and get out. She didn't even look up from her phone, just flicked her fingers like I was some annoying fly buzzing around her perfect life. I stared at them both, my wife, my daughter, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The candles flickered on the table, casting shadows that danced across their faces, and for a second, I couldn't move. My chest tightened, and I thought about yelling, about flipping the table, about demanding they at least open the damn thing and see what I'd done for them. But instead, something else came over me. I laughed. Not a big, loud laugh, just a quiet chuckle that slipped out before I could stop it. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, Clarissa's eyebrows shooting up, Marley finally glancing away from her screen. You sure about that? I asked, keeping my voice steady, almost playful. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, watching them squirm just a little. They didn't know what was in that box. They didn't know what I'd been hiding, what I'd been building while they wrote me off. Clarissa shoved the box back toward me with the back of her hand, like it was trash, and stood up. Get out, she said, her tone flat and final. Marley nodded, smirking like she'd won something. I grabbed the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door without another word. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I heard the lock click behind me. My car was parked in the driveway, the same beat-up sedan I'd been driving for years, and I slid into the driver's seat, the box resting on my lap. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, proof of everything they'd thrown away. I started the engine and pulled out, the streetlights blurring past me as I drove into the night. A week later, My phone started buzzing. Clarissa's name flashed on the screen, then Marley's, over and over. Voicemails piled up, texts too, but I didn't answer. I just sat there in my borrowed room at Uncle Ruben's place, sipping coffee, staring at the little box on the table in front of me. They'd figure it out soon enough. They'd realize what they'd pushed away. And when they did, I'd be ready. Not with anger, not with tears, but with the quiet strength I'd been holding onto all along. I leaned back in the chair, letting the phone vibrate again, and smiled to myself. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 10 years ago, life felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from, and I can still see it so clearly when I close my eyes. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house, the one with the creaky floors and the big bay window, flipping pancakes while Marley giggled at the table, her little hands sticky with syrup. She was 6 then, all wide eyes and messy pigtails, begging me to make the pancakes into Mickey Mouse shapes. "Daddy, make his ears bigger," she'd say, and I'd laugh, pouring extra batter just to see her smile. Clarissa would come in, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess from sleep, and she'd wrap her arms around me from behind, kissing my neck like we were still newlyweds. "You're spoiling her," she'd tease, but her voice was warm, full of love. Back then, I was somebody, running my own engineering firm, small but growing, pulling in contracts that paid for that house, the vacations, the life we had. I'd built it all from scratch, late nights sketching designs, early mornings pitching to clients, and it felt good to see Clarissa proud of me, to hear Marley brag to her friends about her dad's cool job. I thought we were unbreakable, the three of us, a team against the world. But then the deal went bad. It was one big project, a bridge redesign for the city, and I'd sunk everything into it, every dollar, every hope. When the client pulled out last minute, claiming budget cuts, my firm took the hit. Creditors came knocking, bills piled up, and I had to let my team go, one by one, until it was just me in an empty office, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring. I sold the company for pennies, just enough to keep us afloat, but the damage was done. Clarissa's warmth faded first. She stopped hugging me in the mornings, stopped asking how my day was. "You need to figure this out," she'd say, her voice clipped, like I was a problem she had to solve. I tried. I took freelance gigs, fixed cars on the side, even drove for one of those rideshare apps, but it was never enough. The house went into foreclosure, and we moved into a smaller place, a rental with thin walls and a leaky roof. Marley was 10 by then, and I noticed her pulling away too. She'd roll her eyes when I tried to read her stories at night, muttering, "I'm not a baby, Dad," and I'd laugh it off, thinking it was just growing up. But it wasn't. She started copying Clarissa, parroting her complaints. "Why can't we have nice things anymore?" And I'd catch them whispering sometimes, glancing at me like I was the outsider. I kept hustling, picking up odd jobs, anything to put food on the table, but in their eyes, I wasn't the man I used to be. They didn't see the hours I spent trying to rebuild, the nights I stayed up worrying about how to make it right. They saw the fancy life I'd given them before, the big house, the trips to the coast, the clothes, and they loved that, not me. I'd come home from a long day, hands greasy from fixing someone's engine, and Clarissa wouldn't even look up from her phone. "You smell like oil," she'd say, wrinkling her nose, and Marley would giggle like it was a joke. I'd stand there in the doorway, feeling smaller every time, wondering where my family went. I tried talking to Clarissa once, late at night when Marley was asleep. "We can get through this," I said, reaching for her hand across the couch. She pulled away, her eyes cold. "You lost everything, Tom. What's there to get through?" That stung worse than anything, worse than losing the firm, because I realized she didn't believe in me anymore. Marley stopped asking for pancakes, stopped calling me daddy. She'd walk past me in the hall, earbuds in, like I was invisible. I kept going, though, scraping by, telling myself it'd get better, that they'd see I was still fighting for them. But deep down, I knew something had broken, something I couldn't fix with hard work or time. They didn't want the man I was now, just the life I'd lost. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like an itch I couldn't scratch, and it had been gnawing at me for months. It started small, Clarissa coming home later than usual, her heels clicking on the floor past midnight. She'd say it was work, that her job at the marketing firm was demanding more hours, and I'd nod, trying to believe her. "Okay, just don't burn yourself out," I'd say, forcing a smile, but she'd barely look at me, muttering something about deadlines before disappearing into the bedroom. I wanted to trust her God. I did. but the signs kept piling up, little things that didn't add up. Her perfume lingered stronger some nights, a sharp floral scent that wasn't the one I'd bought her years ago for Christmas. She'd brush it off if I asked, saying it was a sample from a client, but it stuck with me, that smell, like a stranger had walked through our house. Then there was Marley, my little girl who wasn't so little anymore, 16 now, and acting like I was some kind of burden. She'd always been close to her mom, but lately she'd gotten worse, rolling her eyes every time I opened my mouth, muttering under her breath when I asked how school was. "You wouldn't get it, Dad," she'd say, her voice dripping with that teenage attitude. But it felt personal, sharper than it used to be. I'd catch her on her phone, texting nonstop, her fingers flying over the screen, and if I walked into the room, she'd tilt it away, whispering into it like I was the enemy. It made my stomach twist, wondering what they were saying about me behind my back. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was paranoid, that losing the company had messed with my head. But then I saw it, the message that cracked everything wide open. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Clarissa had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran to the store. I wasn't snooping, I swear, just grabbing a glass of water, but the screen lit up with a ping, and there it was, bold as day, dinner at our place next time. Can't wait to see you again. Signed, Gregory. Her boss. My heart stopped, then started pounding so hard I thought it had bust out of my chest. I stood there, staring at those words, my hand shaking around the glass. Gregory, tall, slick, always in those tailored suits, the guy who'd show up at company parties with a grin that made me feel small even when I was still on top. I'd met him a few times, shaken his hand, watched him charm the room while I stood there with my cheap beer. And now he was in my life, in my house, in my wife's head. I clicked the email thread, stupid, maybe, but I had to know, and it was all there. Months of messages, flirty at first, then outright planning. Lunch tomorrow? Missed you last night. He doesn't suspect a thing. That last one hit me like a punch to the gut. He was me. I was the fool who didn't see it coming. I closed the laptop, my hands sweaty, and sat down hard on a stool, trying to breathe. Clarissa wasn't just cheating, she was building a whole new life without me, and she was dragging Marley into it. I thought back to those whispers, the way Marley smirked when Clarissa brushed me off, how she'd started calling me embarrassing in front of her friends. It wasn't just teenage rebellion, she was learning it, soaking it up from her mom like a sponge. Clarissa wanted out, and she was making sure Marley hated me enough to follow her, to leave me behind without a second thought. I heard the front door open, Clarissa's keys dingling as she walked in, and I stood up, shoving the stool back. She froze when she saw me, her eyes flicking to the laptop, then to my face. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, casual, like nothing was up. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop at her, to demand why him, why now, why us. But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I didn't know anymore. "Nothing," I said, my voice low, steady. "Just thinking." She shrugged and walked past me, that damn perfume trailing behind her, and I knew right then, she wasn't mine anymore. Neither of them were. I couldn't let it sit there, festering inside me like some rotten thing, so I decided to confront her that night. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you until you can't breathe. Marley was upstairs, probably glued to her phone, and Clarissa was in the living room, flipping through a magazine like everything was normal. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a second, her perfect hair, her manicured nails, the way she sat like she owned the world, and I felt this mix of anger and sadness boiling up. I'd seen the emails, I knew about Gregory, and I couldn't pretend anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She didn't even look up at first, just turned a page and sighed like I was interrupting her. "What now, Tom?" she said, finally glancing at me, her eyes cold and impatient. I took a step closer, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to keep calm. "I know about Gregory," I said, straight out, no dancing around it. "I saw the messages. You're not even trying to hide it anymore, are you?" For a second, she froze, her fingers hovering over the magazine, and I thought maybe she'd deny it, maybe she'd cry or apologize. But then she laughed, sharp and mean, like I'd told her a bad joke. "Oh, you finally figured it out," she said, tossing the magazine onto the coffee table and leaning back on the couch. "Took you long enough." I stood there, stunned, my mouth dry, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "You're just done with me? With us?" She smirked, crossing her arms, and it was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You think I want to spend my life with a has-been?" she said, every word slicing into me. "Greg takes care of me. He respects me. He's got a future, something you haven't had in years." I wanted to yell, to tell her I'd been trying, that I'd never stopped fighting for us. But then Marley's footsteps thudded down the stairs, and she stopped at the bottom, staring at us. Her hair was tied back, her face blank, and she didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. I looked at her, my little girl, hoping she'd say something, anything, to show she still cared. But she didn't. She just crossed her arms like her mom, silent, picking her side without even opening her mouth. Clarissa kept going, like Marley being there made her bolder. "This is his house now," she said, nodding toward the walls I'd painted, the furniture I'd hauled in when we moved here. "Greg's moving in soon. If you want to stay, you better start contributing something useful. Rent, maybe, since you can't do much else." My head spun, and I felt sick, like the floor was dropping out from under me. His house. This was my home. Our home. The place I'd sweated to keep even after the company tanked. And now she was handing it over to some slick bastard who'd probably never lifted a finger for her the way I had. I looked at Marley again, searching her face for a crack, a hint of the kid who used to hug me goodnight, but she just stared back, her eyes hard, like I was nothing to her. "You agree with this?" I asked her, my voice breaking a little. She shrugged, barely moving her shoulders, and muttered, "Whatever Mom says." That was it, the knife twisting deeper. They teamed up, decided I was disposable, a dead weight they could cut loose. I could have fought, could have screamed that I'd built this life for them, that I loved them through every failure, every late bill, every cold night. But standing there, with Clarissa smirking and Marley looking through me, I saw the truth. They didn't care. They hadn't for a long time. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench, and something shifted inside me. Anger turned cold, sharp, like a tool I could use. "Fine," I said, my voice steady now, low and quiet. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to beg or break, but I didn't. I just nodded, slow and deliberate. "You want me gone? I'm gone. But you're gonna regret this." She laughed again, waving me off like I was a kid making empty threats, but I wasn't. I turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood, and I didn't look back. Upstairs, I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with some clothes, my toothbrush, a few things I couldn't leave behind. The whole time, I kept thinking, not about losing them, but about what I'd do next. They thought I was finished, a washed-up nobody with nothing left. They were wrong. I'd been down before, and I'd climbed back up. This time, I'd do it smarter, quieter, and when they realized what they'd thrown away, I'd be the one laughing. I sat on the edge of the lumpy guest bed at Uncle Reuben's place, the little box from the anniversary dinner resting in my hands, and I let my mind drift back to something Clarissa never knew about, something nobody did. Before the company went under, back when I still had a bit of cash and a lot of hope, I'd made a move that seemed crazy at the time. My old college buddy Sanjay had come to me one night, all jittery and excited, practically begging me to invest in his tech startup. "It's a game changer, Tom," he'd said, his eyes wide over beers at some dive bar. "AI software for small businesses. Nobody's doing it like this. I just need seed money to get it off the ground." I'd been doing well then, my firm pulling in steady contracts, so I wrote him a check for $80,000, most of my personal savings, without telling Clarissa. She'd have freaked out, called it a gamble, and maybe she'd have been right. After that, I forgot about it. The company crashed, life got messy, and Sanjay's little project slipped out of my head. I figured it had fizzled out like most startups do, and I wasn't about to dig through old bank statements to check. But 2 years ago, I got a call from him out of the blue. "Tom, you still alive?" He'd laughed, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Man, you're not gonna believe this. We're going public. That $80,000 you gave me? It's worth something now." I'd been in the middle of fixing a neighbor's lawnmower for $20, grease up to my elbows, and I almost dropped the phone. Turns out, his company had taken off quietly at first, then like a rocket. They built some AI tool that every small business in the country wanted, and when they IPO'd, my shares shot up. I didn't tell anyone, not even Uncle Reuben. I just kept reinvesting, letting it grow, watching the numbers climb in silence while Clarissa and Marley treated me like a loser. Last month, I'd finally cashed out a chunk of it, enough to make me a multimillionaire, more money than I'd ever dreamed of back when I was scrambling to pay the rent. I'd moved it into a new account, separate from the joint one Clarissa still dipped into, and I started planning. That box I'd handed her at the dinner? It wasn't some cheap trinket. Inside was a folder, documentation for a new company I'd set up with Sanjay's help, a luxury vacation deed for a beach house I'd bought outright, and a black credit card with no limit, tied to my new fortune. I'd wanted to show her, to say, look, I'm back, better than ever. We can start over. But she didn't even open it, just shoved it away like it was garbage, and Marley backed her up, kicking me out of my own life. Now, sitting in Ruben's spare room, the box felt heavier than it should have. I flipped it open, staring at the papers inside, the sleek black card glinting under the dim lamp. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the weight of what it meant, not just money, but power, a second chance I'd built from nothing. I thought about Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, the way they looked at me like I was less than dirt. They had no idea what I'd been hiding, what I'd turned into while they were busy writing me off. I could have gone back that night, waved the card in their faces, told them I was worth more than Gregory and his fancy suits ever would be. But I didn't. I closed the box, set it on the nightstand, and leaned back against the headboard, the springs creaking under me. Revenge wasn't about flashing cash or rubbing it in. It was about letting them figure it out on their own, watching them squirm when the truth hit. I'd been a ghost in their world for years, invisible, useless in their eyes. Now, I was something else, a man with a plan, a man they'd underestimated. I pictured Clarissa's face when the bills started bouncing, when Gregory's promises fell apart, when Marley realized her perfect little life wasn't so perfect anymore. I didn't need to yell or fight. I just needed to wait. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street, the moon hanging low over the trees. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My chest didn't feel tight. For the first time in years, I felt steady, like I was standing on solid ground again. They'd throw me out, sure, but they'd also set me free. And that box? It wasn't just a gift. It was proof I wasn't the man they thought I was. Not anymore. I stood in the kitchen that night, the anniversary dinner spread out on the table, roast chicken cooling, potatoes getting stiff, candles dripping wax onto the cloth I'd ironed just for this. I'd wanted it to be perfect, a chance to show Clarissa we could still fix things, that I wasn't the failure she saw me as. My hands were sweaty as I slid the little box across to her, the one with the papers, the deed, the card, everything I'd been hiding. Happy anniversary, I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be, hoping she'd hear the weight behind it. She barely glanced at it, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. What's this supposed to be? She said, pushing it back toward me without even touching the ribbon. Before I could answer, Marley chimed in, her voice sharp and bored. It's probably junk. Just leave, Dad. I looked at them, my wife, my daughter, and felt the air shift, like the room was closing in. I'd planned to tell them everything, to open the box and lay it all out. The money, the company, the life I could give them now. But they didn't give me a chance. Clarissa stood up, brushing her hands like she was done with me for good. Get out, she said, flat and cold, and Marley smirked, crossing her arms like she'd been waiting for this. I opened my mouth to argue, to say something, anything, but then the front door creaked open, and there he was. Gregory. Tall, polished, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder like he owned the place. He strolled in, grinning, and dropped his keys on the counter, my counter, like it was his house already. Evening, folks, he said, his voice smooth, and he slid an arm around Clarissa's waist right in front of me. She leaned into him, laughing a little, and he grabbed my wine glass, the one I'd poured for myself, and filled it from the bottle I'd bought. Cheers, he said, raising it to me with a wink before taking a sip. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him drink from my glass, his hand on my wife, my daughter smirking like it was some big win. The room spun for a second, and I felt this hot, jagged thing rise up in my chest, anger, hurt, humiliation, all mixed together. I could have lunged at him, smashed the glass out of his hand, demanded they all listen. But I didn't. Something clicked instead, something cold and clear. I looked at Clarissa, her eyes locked on Gregory like I wasn't even there, and Marley, tapping away on her phone, probably texting her friends about how pathetic I was. They didn't deserve the truth, not yet. I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and forced a smile, small and tight. All right, I said, my voice steady, almost light. I'll go. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, like she expected me to beg, but I just turned and headed for the door. Gregory called after me, "Take care, Tom," his tone dripping with fake pity, and I heard Clarissa laugh again as I stepped outside. The night air hit me hard, crisp and sharp, and I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my boots. I slid into the driver's seat, the box on my lap, and sat there for a minute, staring at the house, my house, lights glowing through the windows. I could still hear them inside, their voices faint, probably joking about how I'd slunk off like a kicked dog. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, and I thought about going back in, unloading everything, telling them I was a millionaire now, that I'd outdone Gregory 10 times over. But I didn't. I started the engine, the rumble filling the silence, and pulled out of the driveway. As I drove away, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror, that smile stayed on my face, not big, not loud, just there. They'd remember it later, that quiet little grin, when they realized what they'd lost. I wasn't running. I wasn't broken. I was done playing their game. The road stretched out ahead, dark and empty, and I felt lighter than I had in years. They thought they'd won, kicking me out, replacing me with that smug bastard. But they didn't know what I had in that box, what I'd been building while they laughed. I turned up the radio, some old rock song buzzing through the speakers, and let the miles roll by. Uncle Ruben's place wasn't far, and I'd crash there tonight, figure out the rest tomorrow. For now, I just drove, the weight of the box a reminder, not of failure, but of power. They'd changed everything that night, sure, but not the way they thought. They'd set me loose, and I was ready to rise. I woke up the next morning on Uncle Ruben's old couch, the springs digging into my back, the smell of strong coffee pulling me out of a restless sleep. My duffel bag sat in the corner, the little box perched on top like a silent promise, and I could still hear Clarissa's voice from last night, "Get out," echoing in my head. Ruben shuffled in, his gray hair sticking up, a mug in each hand. "Told you she was poison," he said, gruff as always, handing me the coffee. I took it, the heat seeping into my palms, and nodded. "Yeah, you did," I said, my voice scratchy from the night. He didn't push, just sat across from me in his beat-up recliner, sipping his drink, letting me think. I'd crashed here after driving away from the house. The image of Gregory pouring wine into my glass burned into my brain. But sitting there, with the morning light creeping through the blinds, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake, really awake, for the first time in years. Ruben's place was small, cluttered with old tools and fishing gear, but it was solid, a lifeline I could grab onto. "What's the plan, kid?" he asked, eyeing me over his mug. I leaned back, the coffee bitter on my tongue, and let the pieces fall into place. I wasn't going back to that house, not to beg or fight. I was done with that life. "I'm building something," I said, slow and sure. "Something new." He grunted, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. "About damn time." That day, I got to work. I drove downtown in my rattling sedan, the box-riding shotgun, and met with a realtor I'd found online. She was a no-nonsense woman named Linda, all sharp edges and quick questions, and within hours, I'd leased a penthouse, top floor, big windows, a view of the city that made my old life look small. I didn't blink at the price. The black card in that box could handle it. I stood in the empty space later that afternoon, the hardwood floors gleaming, the skyline stretching out below, and felt my shoulders loosen. This was mine, nobody else's. Next, I called Sanjay. "Need an assistant," I told him. "Someone good, full-time." He laughed, that same excited laugh from the bar all those years ago. "You're really doing this, huh? I'll send you someone tomorrow." By the next day, I had Tara, young, sharp, with a clipboard and a knack for keeping things moving. She didn't ask about my past, just nodded when I said I was starting a venture capital firm. "What's the name?" she asked, pen poised. I thought about it, staring out at the city. "Silverline Ventures," I said. "A new line, a new start." We set up shop fast, laptops, a desk, a phone line, and I pulled more cash from my account, the one Clarissa didn't know about. I'd been funneling money there for months, ever since I sold those shares, and now it was time to use it. I started scouting startups, small outfits like Sanjay's had been, places with big ideas and no capital. I'd been on the other side once, begging for a chance, and now I could give it. Silverline Ventures wasn't just a name, it was me, back in the game, stronger than before. Clarissa and Marley didn't cross my mind much those first few days. I was too busy, too focused. Tara handled calls, I met with founders, and Ruben dropped by with takeout, grumbling about the traffic but grinning when he saw the penthouse. "Not bad, kid," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I was building in silence, brick by brick, and it felt good, damn good, to be the one in control again. Then the letters started showing up. The first one came a week after the dinner, forwarded from the old address to Ruben's. Clarissa's handwriting, neat and slanted, on a plain envelope. I didn't open it, just tossed it on the kitchen table and kept moving. Another came 2 days later, then a third, each one thicker, like she was pouring more words into them. I didn't read those either. Marley sent one too, her messy scrawl a shock after all her silence, but I left it unopened with the rest. My phone buzzed sometimes, her number, then Marley's, but I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear their voices yet. I knew what was coming. They'd figure it out soon. The money, the life I'd hidden, and they'd want back in. But I wasn't ready to let them. I stood on the penthouse balcony one night, the city lights twinkling below, a glass of whiskey in my hand. The air was cool, the world quiet except for the hum of traffic far off. I thought about that dinner, Gregory's smug face, Clarissa's laugh, Marley's smirk. They'd kicked me out, sure, but they'd also handed me this. A clean slate, a chance to rise without their weight dragging me down. I was back, stronger, richer, sharper. And when they came knocking, I'd be the one deciding who got in. I was sitting at my new desk in the penthouse, papers spread out, Tara typing away across the room. When I got the first hint, it was starting to unravel for them. My phone buzzed, not Clarissa or Marley this time, but the bank. I'd pulled my name off the joint account the night before the anniversary dinner, a quiet move I'd made after seeing Gregory waltz in like he owned the place. The banker's voice was calm, professional. Just confirming the mortgage payment bounced, sir. The account's overdrawn. I leaned back in my chair, a slow grin creeping across my face. Not my problem anymore, I said. I'm not on it. He paused, then said, understood, and hung up. I pictured Clarissa standing in the kitchen, staring at a declined card, her perfect little world cracking. She'd always handled the bills, dipping into that account like it was bottomless, never asking where the money came from. Well, it was my money keeping it afloat, and now it was gone. A few days later, I got a call from a guy I knew at the car dealership. Hey Tom, just a heads up, your wife's lease on that SUV? It's in your name, and she missed the payment. We're repossessing it tomorrow. I chuckled, sipping my coffee. Go ahead, I said. I'm not paying it. The car was hers in every way but the paperwork. Shiny, black, the kind of thing she loved showing off. I could see her now, fuming as they towed it away, Marley whining about how she'd get to school. It wasn't spite, not really. It was just me stepping back, letting them feel the weight of their choices. The call started soon after. Clarissa first, her voice loud through the voicemail. You better help us, Tom. This is your mess too. I didn't pick up, just let it play while I ate lunch. Ruben's leftover meatloaf, still better than anything she'd cooked lately. Then Marley, her tone sharp but shaky. Dad, what's going on? Mom's freaking out. Call me back. I didn't. The house, the car, the bills, they'd built their life on me, and now the foundation was gone. I kept working, meeting with startups, signing checks with that black card, while their world fell apart. Word got around fast. A buddy from the old neighborhood texted me. Saw Gregory peel out of your driveway last night. Looked pissed. I wasn't surprised. Sanjay had done some digging for me. Turns out Gregory's successful life was a house of cards. Bad investments, a failing side hustle, debts he couldn't pay. He'd been leaning on Clarissa's stability, her house, her money, my money, to prop himself up. When the mortgage bounced and the car vanished, he bolted. I laughed out loud when I heard, imagining her face when he walked out, leaving her with nothing but her pride. Marley started posting online, vague, dramatic stuff like everything's falling apart and people suck. I saw it on my phone one night, scrolling while Tara ordered takeout. The kid who'd smirked at me was crumbling, and part of me felt a pang. She was still my daughter, but it faded fast. She'd chosen her side. The calls changed after that. Clarissa's voice softened, desperate now. Please, Tom, just talk to me. We can figure this out. Then Marley, quieter, almost scared. Dad, I'm sorry. Can you call me? I let them stack up, a dozen voicemails I didn't answer. They'd kicked me out, laughed me off, and now they were drowning. One night, I was on the balcony, the city humming below, a beer in my hand, when the phone rang again. Clarissa. I stared at it, the screen glowing in the dark, and something made me pick up. Her voice came through, small and shaky. Tom? Oh God, please don't hang up. I miss you. Can we meet? I let the silence stretch, listening to her breathe, picturing her in that house, empty now, no car, no Gregory, no money. You threw away a diamond for costume jewelry, I said, my voice low. Steady. She didn't say anything, just sniffled, and I hung up. That was it. No yelling, no begging, just the truth. I set the phone down, took a long sip of beer, and looked out at the lights. The fall had begun, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. They'd made their bed, let them lie in it. I'd warned them at the dinner, that quiet, you'll regret this, and now they did. The penthouse was warm behind me, Tara's laugh drifting out as she talked to someone on the phone, and I felt solid, rooted. They'd lost everything, Gregory, the house, the life, and I'd lost nothing that mattered. I was free, and they were stuck, scrambling for scraps I wouldn't give. The phone stayed quiet after that, and I knew they'd gotten the message. I wasn't their lifeline anymore. I was pushing a cart through the supermarket, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when I saw her. Marley, standing by the discount bins, a bag of ramen noodles in her hand. It had been weeks since the last call, since I'd told Clarissa they'd thrown away a diamond, and I hadn't expected to run into either of them. She looked different, hair messy, pulled back in a sloppy ponytail, her hoodie sagging off one shoulder, no trace of the polished teenager who'd smirked at me that night. Her cart had a few cheap items, soap, a loaf of bread, some canned stuff, and I stopped, the wheels squeaking on the tile. She glanced up, and her eyes went wide, like she'd seen a ghost. "Dad?" she whispered, the ramen slipping a little in her grip. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at her. Part of me wanted to walk away, to keep moving past the aisle like she wasn't there, but something held me back. "Hey," I said, my voice flat, not giving much away. She shifted, clutching the bag tighter, and took a step closer. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small, almost lost in the hum of the store. I nodded, slow and careful, and pushed my cart to the side, leaning against it. "Go ahead," I said. She swallowed, looking down at her sneakers, worn out, scuffed, and started talking. "Things are bad, Dad. Really bad. Mom's a mess. The house is gone. We're in some crappy apartment now. Gregory left. And she cries all the time." I listened, my arms crossed, keeping my face steady. I could picture Clarissa, unraveling without her perfect life, but I didn't feel the pull to fix it. Not anymore. Marley kept going, her words tumbling out. "I didn't know it'd get like this. I thought Mom was right, that you were just, I don't know, holding us back. But now everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." She looked up at me then, her eyes wet, pleading. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean it. All that stuff I said." I took a deep breath, the air cold from the freezers nearby, and let her words settle. I'd waited for this, hadn't I? For them to see what they'd done, to come crawling back? But hearing it didn't feel like a win. It just felt heavy. "You were a kid," I said, my voice low but firm. "You followed her lead. I get that. But you stood there, Marley, while she kicked me out. You laughed with her. That's not something I can just forget." Her face crumpled a little, and she nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "I know," she said. "I messed up. I miss you." I didn't realize how much until now. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the girl she used to be, my little shadow, the one who'd climb into my lap and beg for stories. But that was gone, buried under years of her choosing Clarissa's side. "Trust's a hard thing," I said. "Once it's broken, it doesn't snap back together overnight. You hurt me, Marley, both of you did. I'm not saying never, but I'm not ready to pretend it didn't happen." She nodded again, tears spilling now, and I felt that old ache in my chest, the one that came from loving her even when she turned away. "Okay," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know. I didn't hug her, didn't promise anything, I couldn't yet. I just gave her a small nod and said, 'Take care of yourself,' before pushing my cart past her." The rest of the shopping felt mechanical, my hands grabbing cereal and milk while my mind churned. That night, an email popped up from Clarissa. "Tom, I was angry. I was stupid. Please, let's have coffee." I stared at it, the cursor blinking, and typed back, "The man you insulted is gone. The man you need now doesn't exist for you." I hit send and closed the laptop. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. I sat on the penthouse couch, the city lights glowing through the windows, and thought about Marley's face, lost, scared, sorry. I'd meant what I said. Trust was a slow build, and they'd torched it. But she was my kid, and that tugged at me, even if I didn't want it to. I didn't owe them anything, not after what they'd done, but I wasn't sure I could cut them off forever either. Not yet. I got up, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window, watching the world move below. They were falling, and I was rising, and maybe someday there'd be a middle ground. But for now, I let them sit with it, their choices, their regrets, while I kept building, step by step, on my own terms. I stood in the penthouse kitchen a year later, the smell of grilled steak and garlic bread wafting through the air, the clink of glasses and laughter filling the space. It was a quiet dinner party, nothing flashy, just the people who'd stuck by me, the ones who mattered. Uncle Reuben was there, leaning back in a chair with a beer, his gravelly voice cutting through the chatter as he told some old fishing story. Sanjay sat across from him, grinning, his tie loosened after a long day, toasting me with a glass of red wine. To the man who bet on me when nobody else did, he said, and I raised my glass back, feeling the warmth of it settle in my chest. Tara was there too, my assistant-turned-friend, joking with the small team I'd built at Silverline Ventures, good people, sharp and loyal, who'd helped turn my little firm into something real. And then there was Nora, sitting next to me, her dark hair catching the light, her laugh soft but bright. I'd met her a few months back at a business conference, smart, steady, with a way of seeing through bullshit that reminded me of Reuben. She wasn't pushy, didn't need anything from me, just showed up with her dry humor and kind eyes, and somehow, she'd become part of this new life. We'd been taking it slow, no labels, just dinners and late-night talks, but having her here tonight felt right. The table was crowded with plates, steak, potatoes, a big salad Reuben insisted on making, and the city lights twinkled outside, framing us like a picture I never thought I'd have. I looked around, soaking it in, and realized Clarissa and Marley hadn't crossed my mind all night. They were ghosts now, shadows from a life I'd left behind. After that supermarket run-in with Marley, after Clarissa's unanswered email, they'd faded out. No more calls, no more letters, just silence. I'd heard through the grapevine they'd moved somewhere cheaper, that Clarissa was working some low-end job, that Marley was scraping by at community college. I didn't check, didn't dig. They weren't my story anymore. We finished eating, and I stepped onto the balcony, the cool air brushing my face, a glass of whiskey in my hand. Nora followed me out, leaning on the railing beside me, her shoulder close but not touching. "Nice night," she said, her voice easy, and I nodded, staring at the skyline. "Yeah, feels good." She didn't ask about the past, she never did, but I could tell she knew there was weight behind my quiet. Inside, Reuben's laugh boomed, Sanjay's voice rising over it, and I smiled to myself. This was my family now, the real one, not blood, not obligation, but choice. I set the glass down and pulled the little box from my pocket, the same one from that anniversary dinner, the one Clarissa had shoved away. I'd kept it, not for them, but for me. I flipped it open, the papers still inside, the black card glinting, and I took out a pen from my jacket. On a scrap of paper, I wrote, "To the man I used to be. Thank you for surviving." I folded it, slipped it into the box, and closed the lid, feeling lighter than I had in years. Nora glanced over, curious but not prying. "What's that?" she asked, her tone light. "Just a note," I said, sliding the box back into my pocket. "Saying goodbye to some old stuff." She nodded, like she got it, and we stood there, the city humming below, the stars faint above. I thought about that night a year ago, Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, Gregory's smug grin, and how it pushed me here. They'd meant to break me, to toss me out like trash, but instead, they'd handed me a way out. I'd risen quietly, built this life step by step, and now I was standing taller than ever. The dinner party wound down, Reuben clapping me on the back as he left, Sanjay promising to call about a new deal, Tara hugging me quick before heading out. Nora stayed, helping me stack plates, her presence steady and calm. "Good crew," she said, drying a glass, and I nodded. "The best." Later, alone on the balcony again, I looked at the box one last time, then set it on the ledge. It wasn't about them anymore, Clarissa, Marley, the betrayal. It was about me, the man I'd become, the one who'd survived and thrived. I toasted the air, the city, the future, and let the past slip away for good.